Welcome viewers to this episode of the weekly dialogues under the Jaipur dialogues, and I have a specialist on the Mughals, not just the Mughal curry, but on Mughals proper, and that is Abhijit Iyer Mitra for you. And among his major distinctions is that he is the only one that I can recall in India who has gone and danced on Babur's grave. Now, he would also be able to tell you the exact location because a lot of people think that Babur's grave is in Kabul, but he's actually gone and danced on the grave proper, so he knows better. And the topic for this session is Mughals made India richer. Now, richer, quote unquote. So we'll be talking all dimensions of this richness, including wealth, including culture, and including quote unquote other things. So Abhijit, can you tell us the location of Babur's grave, please?
Well, it is in Kabul, outside Kabul, in not unfortunately where Audrey Trusky wants you to believe. It's actually about 10-15 meters away from the photos she took and posited as Babur's grave. What she posted as photos was actually the mosque just adjacent to Babur's grave. You have to go about 15 feet higher and about 30-40 feet on the right, and then you come to Babur's grave.
So what really made you dance on the Babur's grave? You were taking out the frustrations of the Indians who were trampled upon by Babur and his descendants, including...
No. I was celebrating the Ganga-Yamuna Tehzeeb, I was so happy to see my emperor that, I broke out simultaneously into dance because, when the emperor comes, it's meant to be a very joyous thing. So here was this great emperor and I felt the need to break out into dance. Like, Rakhi Sawant frequently says, कि उफ मेरे को मैं plane में हूँ और मेरे को suddenly dance करने का बहुत urge कर रहा है. It was like that. So it was a mark of respect.
That was great. So what we'll do is that in the comment section, we'll also post that dance clip, if you can share with us. So we'll do that so people will really enjoy the high Mughal culture. So what about
of course.
Enriching Mughal culture? Have you had a taste of it? Do you have a taste of it when you have that Mughlai food, or where do you really feel that richness? And that richness must be coursing through your veins. You do that.
So, what's amazing is I've danced all across Central Asia. I've actually tracked most of Babur's career in that sense. Went into the Fargana Valley in Uzbekistan, to Samarkand, to Bokhara, to a large part of Afghanistan. Remember, it's still, I couldn't go as much into rural Afghanistan as I wanted. And you know what the amazing thing is? That 90% of what is passed off in India today as Mughal culture has nothing to do with the areas where this man came from. Okay, be it in terms of what we call Mughlai food. If we passed on Mughlai food to the Uzbeks and the Afghans as Mughlai, they'd be staring at us gobsmacked, saying, "Have you gone stark raving mad?" Because what they eat is nothing like what we eat. Even in terms of rice, for example, all right. Even in terms of rice, they don't cook rice the way we do. So there's a whole discordance between that and what you hear as Mughlai culture. Similarly, you go to the native forms of music in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Afghanistan. It's nothing like Indian music, right? It can be an origin point in the sense as much as saying that we are all ultimately chimpanzees. Mughlai cuisine has about as much connection with Mughalistan as the modern Indian human being has to a chimpanzee. That's about it. In terms of food, in terms of music, even in terms of architecture, right? Because you go there, the shape is the same, But the nuance of decorating it, which is to put these heavily colored tiles and things like that, is very, very different. Here, it is in India that the architecture celebrates the form and the shape using stone rather than the color and the tile, which is what Persianate architecture does. So, you know, there are two Persias. There's Iran and there's Turan. Iran is what we know as Persia proper. And then there's Turan, which is Turkified northern Iranian areas. So Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and all of that, which are Turkic ethnically, but Persianate culturally. Everything, where is the connection? It is at best a starting point. And what we had in India was entirely developed on its own. Biryani, for example, which everybody insists comes from Persia and all of that. One thing I will give you is Iranians cook rice. They know how to cook rice better than we do. You have to give them that. That said, the biryani is absolutely not from Iran. If you look at the way they cook their rice, they will not mix stock and rice in Iran. Okay, they will not, for example, in Isfahan, biryani is a kaleji ki kebab served on a naan. It has nothing to do with rice. Okay. In Uzbekistan, the pulao is just, it's very simply just carrots, onions, jeera, meat, garlic with chawal added into it. It doesn't even go into the nuance of Iranian rice making. So, you know, there is so much. It is at best a starting point. Like I said, there is as much Iranian, Turanian influence in what you call Mughal culture as there is chimpanzee DNA in the modern human being.
So you would say that the entire Ganga-Jamuni Tehzeeb is a big hoax, and it is more and more of actual Ganga-Jamuna and very less of the hoaxes?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at it, it's this Ganga-Jamuni Tehzeeb. I think my friend Abhinav Prakash makes this very important point, that there never was a Ganga-Jamuni Tehzeeb. Most of India used to live in a state of near permanent hostility, and in those today that hostility is restricted to rural areas more than urban. But they didn't coexist. They just ignored each other and led separate lives, almost as if it were parallel universes. For example, in Star Trek, you have the original Star Trek with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, has this whole series called In the Mirror Darkly, where they travel into this parallel universe. It's almost like that in that sense. Where the mixture happened was in the nobility, but their nobility was mixing everywhere. You look at the ancient world, the nobility kept marrying. There were many, many Byzantine princesses in Western European lines, which opposed the Eastern Church completely. Catholic and Protestant princesses used to marry even at the height of the wars of religion and things like that. So, you know, this is an elite culture can't be superimposed on the remaining 90% of the population, which was always rural and always very, very separate.
And even this elite, what we have, the Irani-Turani elite, the Mughals particularly, I'm referring this as Mughal, but basically it is Islamic, because even in the earlier Khilji, Lodi and the slave dynasties, similar things happen. But the basic grain, that basic grain of Islamic supremacism, and the basic grain of the holy war, of the jihad, was always the subtext behind all their actions. That is my assumption. What do you have to say to this?
Absolutely. Look, when we talk about religious terrorism today, in terms of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever, you know, we just deal with what is the given cause for said action. We don't go into the fact that, Osama bin Laden was his real motive was to get rid of the Saudis and so on and so forth. It is very clear and simple Islamic terrorism, because that is the nature of the language he uses. That is the nature of what Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi used. We don't go into the fact that he might have been traumatized by Saddam Hussein's troops or by Shia neighbors or something like that when he was a kid. That is not the methodology you use for gauging what is religious terrorism. so-called Hindu terrorism, of which, I'm yet to see any evidence. And in case of Islamic terrorism, you just go by the given reason for what they've done. Now, what is the given reason that all these rulers used to attack India and to slaughter people? Very simply, Islam. Okay, that it was actually motivated by whatever wealth and la-di-da-di-da. Of course, it was motivated by wealth. But here's the point. If you want to create wealth, why do you have to keep imposing jizya? You look at how erratic the Delhi Sultanate is. You look at their coinage. There is no consistency. This is not a wealthy society. This is an extreme garrison state. You judge the prosperity of a society by its coinage. And one very easy way of telling you is the gold content, the silver content, and the bronze content in copper content in coinage. In this particular case, there is absolutely, even during Khilji's reign, it varies so vastly. So their beloved Khilji himself, was prone to this sort of what in German is called the Raubenwirtschaft, the plunder economy, where every time your state resources run low, you have to go plunder. In that sense, it is your typical nomadic economy, in which case you've taken a country that's very, very prosperous. Prosperity has to be sustained. It is even like modern economic policy. You can't just have tax terrorism one day and then say, okay, now you can grow. And then 10 years later, you come back with tax terrorism. That is not the way growth happens. So you see all the economic patterns and the methodology. It has to be linked to this Ghazwa-e-Hind. Now, there is this belief, these people keep saying, that somehow it isn't fair that, what all these sultans wrote about themselves was exaggeration. They had to, pose to their co-religionists saying that they actually did kill those people, but they just said they destroyed 10 temples and killed 10,000 Kafirs. Okay. Now, here's my issue. You want us to believe these same journals when they're talking about the Mongols, Genghis Khan coming and destroying Persia. But then you're saying, don't believe the same journals when these same people tell you that, we have gone and killed 10,000 Kafirs and destroyed 10,000 temples. I mean, really, kuch to consistency rakho. There is a methodological inconsistency today between how you are judging history and how you are judging Islamic or any religious terrorism today, number one. There is an inconsistency in your narrative of a golden age and of the numismatic, the coin record. And there is an inconsistency in Mongol atrocity literature, what you want us to believe from those same Muslim sources, and Delhi Sultanate atrocity literature, which you say it's just exaggeration.
Okay, we have a second session scheduled on the secularism of the Mughals, so we will go into further details in that. Let's come to the main issue. That is the Mughals made India richer. Now, Mughals made India richer in terms of what? In terms of GDP, in terms of per capita, in terms of less inequality, in terms of people becoming richer, or in terms of just the nobility becoming richer?
So here's the thing. It's really very funny because if you actually go through the historical GDP figures, which our beloved Rana Safi, who started off this entire debate, if you want to even call it that. I mean, seriously, brain deadedness isn't a debate the last time I checked, but let's call it a debate. What she ignores is the fact that at this time, she is going by overall size of the economy. She ignores the fact that the entire revenue, almost 70 to 80% of the revenue was in the hands of 655 families. It was a typical Bronze Age. Imagine these kind of economic resource capture hadn't been seen since the Bronze Age. This was called the palace economies. This kind of wealth distribution pattern. Sorry, can you see me? Yeah. We only see in Europe, in the Mediterranean region, in areas between Egypt, Cyprus, the Levant, Phoenicia, what was Phoenicia in those days, all of this came crumbling down when the sea peoples attacked. And it used to be called the palace economy. And the actual people used to be dirt poor. So, the pyramids, for example, are the clearest example of an economy like this, where just to get their daily bread, they had to do back-breaking labor and build the Sphinx, build the pyramids. And, these pharaohs went down in Egyptian history as horrible, horrible tyrants, the pharaohs of the Bronze Age, right? So you're looking at a model, a feudal extractive economy, which was extremely merciless, extremely inequitable, and did nothing for the development of the country. However, we also need to acknowledge one other thing. When you have such extreme resource capture, and mind you, of this resource capture, 30% of the revenue of the Mughal Empire simply went into the upkeep of the Mughal court. Imagine a bunch of courtiers taking up 30% of your national revenue. Jewels, food, palaces, so on and so forth. Again, you see what I'm talking about, the palace economy as it's called in the Bronze Age. There's this wonderful book called 1177 BC, the year the world collapsed. And that's, the volcanic explosion in Cyprus, somewhere in Cyprus, that collapses the ancient Bronze Age world. It is exactly like that. And what they do is they start patronizing the arts. So, in that sense, the food culture, the music culture, and all of that is still uniquely, latently Indian. And this is why in the earlier part, I said it's only as much linked to Turan and Iran as there is chimpanzee DNA in us, right? It was money that was used to stimulate latent Indian art, latent Indian cooking. You look at things like chili. Chili didn't get popular in India till the 1700s, even because it was an Aztec product. Potatoes didn't come into India. Potatoes and tomatoes didn't get popularized till 1700, 1800, which is why a lot of Mughlai cuisine, you'll see dahi being used. Dahi is the souring agent, right? Or nimbu used to be the souring agent. So there's all kinds of these inconsistencies. There was definitely, like those palace economies, high inequity economies, where the elite culture blossoms. Now let's contrast this with Europe in the same period, from the 1500s to the 1857 really. You look at the amount of public goods being built in Europe, it is fantastic. It goes back to the level of Roman Empire style public goods, and the Romans built public goods. You will not come across palaces for the Roman emperors. You go see Augustus's house, you go see Hadrian's Tivoli gardens and all of that. They are tiny compared to the public works they undertook for the Roman people. That is why the Roman legions used to call SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome, because public wealth was spent on the people of Rome. And this is where you see Europe, all the money is being spent on the good of the people, right? At this time, India is already even the peak period, the absolute peak period of Mughal glory, this period from Akbar to Aurangzeb, right? The per capita income of Europe is higher. Italy leads the pack. We have around 450 to 500 US dollars per capita. Italy is at 1,100 US dollars per capita. Yeah. Right. Really followed. Europe traditionally has had two industrial heartlands. One has been northern Italy, and the other has been the Rhine Basin. And you again see that these two areas have a much, much higher per capita income. Now, today, it's like saying, Khalida Zia made Bangladesh rich. Why? Because the Bangladeshi economy is bigger than the Israeli economy. Are you kidding me? Bangladeshi economy is bigger than the Israeli economy because you have 160 million people existing at about $2,000 or something like that per capita. Israel exists at about $50,000 per capita, but it's only got 7 million people. Obviously, it's smaller. So, you say we accounted for 1/3 of world trade. Now, here's the amazing thing. At no point under British rule, in fact, under Mughal rule, we stagnated as an economy, even going by the figures that they love so much. Under British rule, we had growth every year, consistent in spite of all the famines, year after year after year after year. It is that our trade volume compared to the rest of the world went down, not because of us. It went down because the rest of the world industrialized and went way, way ahead of us. We didn't fall back under the British. There was no regression of living standards under the British. So here is the whole problem. What British left you with was in fact the clearest reflection of what the Mughal Empire left you with. Rashtrapati Bhavan, North Block, South Block, the vulgar opulence of them, they're also extremely tasteless. I don't know if you've been in there, but nothing works. Everything smells of rancid batshit, and it's ugly as hell on the inside. Beyond belief opulent. When you have such extraordinary hunger and poverty around you, it was an exact snapshot of what the Mughals left you with.
So
that's it.
That is how the Mughals made India richer, also because the courtiers became richer. And since this whole debate that we are talking about Mughals and others and all this, because of that little debate between Javed, Akhtar and Tarek Fatah. And I have to inform my viewers that Mr. Javed Akhtar, the great lyricist, or the who also popularized the Billa number 786 in in Diwar, he happens to be a proper Farooqi Ashraf. You understand this term? Ashraf Arzal Ajlaf. So Ashraf is the top of the lot. Those descendants,
the nobility.
The descendants of Arabs. Unless you are a descendant from an Arab family, you don't count for real Ashraf. Of course, they have co-opted the Persian nobility and also the upper nobility of India who converted. Particularly, you will see that in Pakistan a lot. But Mr. Javed Akhtar is a proper courtier of the Mughal nobility. He is the 34th descendant of Amirul Momineen, Caliph Hazrat Umar Farooqi. So he is a Farooqi Ashraf. And how dare a converted Muslim like Tarek Fatah cross swords with him? So that is how India was made richer by this Ashraf nobility. I think that is another point that you must consider.
Also, if you don't mind, I'm going to take away a bit to another courtier, Irfan Habib. Because, this entire, if you remember, this entire drama started off about 10, 12 years back. More, I think about 20 years back, when Irfan Habib wrote his book on how the Mughals industrialized India. That we were a great industrial power. Now, I posit to you that Irfan Habib doesn't know jack shit about industrialization. When we use the term industrialization, that starts sometime in the late 1600s in Europe.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Irfan Habib is one of the few medieval Indian historian or historian of medieval Indian history who is on record admitting that he knows neither Sanskrit nor Persian nor Arabic. Please carry on.
Amazing, isn't it? Just amazing. So what happens is Irfan Habib also doesn't know economics, because when we talk about industrialization, we have a very, very specific meaning to it. It is basically the introduction of chemical energy into the means of production. Now, starting from the 1100s at least, we have Chinese records from about 147 AD, which shows chemical energy, namely gunpowder and cannons, being used in war. We have confirmed records from the 1100s, and then because of the Mongol invasions, Genghis Khan, there's this transference of technology from east to west, and the west becomes better at cannons and things like that. So chemical energy used in war is very, very old. But chemical energy used in the means of production, starting with the coal engine to extract coal in British coal mines, starts in the late 1600s. It gathers steam in the 1700s. And to give you a simple example, what a machine can do, no human hand can do as quickly, as precisely, and that is the meaning of an industrial revolution. Now, it starts off with coal, and then in the late 1800s, very late 1800s and early 1900s, it becomes the petrol, the diesel revolution. And then, we have the digital revolution in the 80s, and then the information revolution in the 90s. Irfan Habib does not know any of this. He considers a lot of people sitting and spinning charkhas to weave to be industrialization. Because for him, it is the number of people working that equals industry. I mean, can you imagine a more clueless historian whose idea of industry, he doesn't even know that it is the introduction of chemical energy to the means of production that constitutes industrialization. He actually tells you that the factories of Murshidabad and all of that, they employ tens of thousands, therefore they were industrialized. How do you even make a man like this a historian? In what universe is a man like this a historian? He's clueless about anthropology, he's clueless about economics, he's even clueless about historical terms. And this is the problem when you consider yourself a historian simply by reading old texts rather than looking at sociological context. This is the kind of quackery that used to pass off as historian once upon a time. You can't pass off as a historian anymore.
That is, of course, the Marxist school of historians, the Aligarh school. It was started by his father, Muhammad Habib. That is a discussion for some other time, but it will come out in fair detail in the next book that I'm coming out with on CA 370. And just the final shot at this. Then this is what we are talking about. And incidentally, Rana Safi is a student of Irfan Habib.
Of course, it shows. Like the teacher saw the student, dumb as bricks.
What happens after Aurangzeb's term comes to an end? In fact, Aurangzeb's writ had stopped to run around about 1690 itself, when he was wandering from place to place. And in the last 6 or 7 years, he was being chased from place to place by Queen Tarabai. And he was looking for places to hide. And it was during that chase that he got sick and died. That's another fact. But there is also another contention that says that between 1700 and 1800, it was the Marathas whose writ ran in India. And therefore, if any kind of impoverishment happened, it should be laid at the door of the Marathas and not at the door of the Mughals.
Fair point. But here is the issue with that. How long did the Marathas have to rule?
About 100 years or so.
100 years or so. And remember, this is a economy which is still recovering from the feudal. The Maratha system was no different from the Mughal system in that sense. Except you find that Maratha public works for the people are far, far greater than any Mughal public works. Wealth, once it is destroyed, takes a very, very long time to rebuild. Let me give you a simple example, Bihar. Bihar was destroyed in 1857. Till then, Bihar was the beating heart of India. Everything that was good or great about India, the Mauryas, the Guptas, Kalidasa, everything had come out of Bihar. Yet, after your 1857 revolt, it took you just one generation of abstract impoverishment to destroy the entire culture of Bihar and turn it into the backwater of India. Destroying culture takes a very, very short period of time. Recreating it takes a long, long, long period of time. So there are many issues with this. First of all, absolutely the Marathas controlled it, where in some cases the Maratha absolutely rapine. Like in example, the Maratha ditch in Kolkata, though not in Odisha. In Odisha, Maratha rule was extremely light, right? So how do you explain this difference between how they dealt with Bengal and how they dealt with Odisha, right? Odisha doesn't have any memory of, their memories of the Marathas are basically the Marathas going hammer and tongs at the Mughal governors out there. So there is a great deal of nuance even to this. Where the Marathas at some point inept rulers? Beyond doubt they were. Some of them were absolutely inept rulers. For example, this entire campaign against Ahmad Shah Abdali, which is glorified today, If you actually read Mooladhara's, you know who I'm talking about, the gentleman who's written the history of the Battle of Panipat and all of that, the Maratha historian. He will show you how inept that entire campaign was in that sense, which is fine. But remember, culture once destroyed takes a very, very long time to rebuild. This wasn't a Maratha economic model. The Maratha rule was far, far lighter, much lighter than Mughal rule. You didn't have Katleams happening like this. You did not have the kind of economic disruption happening like this. Show me the same numismatic distress, the kind of numismatic variation happening during Maratha rule. It doesn't happen. At the same time, we need to acknowledge the Maratha starting point was very, very low given the destruction. Aurangzeb walked into the Deccan and destroyed it. Right. Aurangzeb destroyed the empire. Aurangzeb was no different from Ashoka in the sense that they went on fighting and so-called expansion while they hollowed it out from the inside.
Exactly. And what happened, in fact, if you look at the record of Shah Jahan as well, when the great famine occurred in the Deccan, at that time the total relief given to Deccan was about 4 lakh rupees in those times, whereas the wajifa of one of the princesses was 10 lakhs. I mean, that is the kind of rapacity that particular nobility had. Thank you very much, Abhijit, for this session. Now,
thank you, sir, always for having me.
We'll bring this to a close, and we will be meeting shortly for another session on another interesting Mughal aspect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.